Hi, everyone, and welcome back. You're listening to the Deep Dive on Westferry Times. Today, we're looking into something pretty significant, the UK's decision, very recently, to suspend trade talks with Israel. We've gathered various reports, and we want to sort of unpack the reasons, look at the humanitarian crisis in Gaza that seems to be driving this, and, well, explore the potential fallout.
It's definitely a complex situation, lots of moving parts.
Absolutely. And to help us make sense of it all, we're really pleased to have Dr. James Thornton with us today. He's a senior fellow in international relations at the Royal Institute of Global Affairs. Dr. Thornton, thanks for joining us.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Okay, let's dive right in then. Could you maybe start us off with the main headline? What exactly prompted the UK to hit pause on these trade negotiations?
Sure. So the formal suspension was announced on May 20th, 2025, and the primary driver was the situation in Gaza, specifically the worsening humanitarian conditions. This is linked to the ongoing military operations, of course, but maybe even more pointedly, the blockade, the restrictions that are making it incredibly difficult to get essential humanitarian aid through to civilians.
Right, and it wasn't just a quiet bureaucratic move, was it? I seem to recall some pretty strong language being used.
Yes, definitely. The Foreign Secretary, David Lammy, he used very direct terms. He called the blockade morally wrong,
Mm.
and he explicitly linked it to British values, saying it was an affront to those values. That really does signal the level of concern.
That's what makes this so interesting because, well, historically, the UK and Israel have had quite close ties, haven't they? This feels like a real departure.
It does. It's a notable shift.
So beyond just the trade talks, what does this say about the underlying relationship? Is the UK reevaluating things more broadly?
That's a very good question. The strong historical links made this decision particularly significant. It suggests perhaps a kind of recalibration, maybe placing more weight now on humanitarian issues, international law, even with a close, long-standing partner. The reports mentioned over 53,000 Palestinian deaths since October 2023. That sheer number inevitably forces a reevaluation.
And those historical ties make the contrast with the current situation in Gaza even starker. Can you maybe paint a clearer picture for us? What does this humanitarian crisis actually look like on the ground?
Well, it's incredibly grim. The blockade means severe limits on basic necessities. We're talking food, clean water, medical supplies. It's a daily struggle for survival for ordinary people there.
And the potential human costs, the numbers being talked about, are just hard to comprehend.
Tragically, yes.
Yeah.
The UN has put out some extremely alarming warnings. They've suggested, I believe, that up to 14,000 children could be at risk of dying within, well, just 48 hours if substantial aid doesn't get in immediately.
14,000 children? That's...
It underlines the sheer urgency, yes,
Uh-huh.
the severity.
Given how dire things are, it really begs the question, what's the rest of the world saying? How's the international community responding?
We are seeing growing international condemnation. It's definitely mounting, both regarding the aid restrictions and the ongoing military offensive, and several countries seem to be moving beyond just words.
Okay, well, like, who? Are there specific examples?
Well, reports suggest countries like France, Canada too, they've indicated, alongside the UK, that they might consider concrete actions if things don't change, if aid isn't allowed in freely and the offensive doesn't stop.
So coordinated pressure is building then.
It appears so. That kind of joint stance carries significant weight, diplomatically speaking.
Now, thinking about the UK's response again, suspending trade talks is a big step. Have they taken any other actions?
Yes, they have. Alongside the trade talk suspension, the UK has also brought in targeted sanctions. These are aimed at specific individuals and organizations linked to illegal settlements in the West Bank. So it's a related but distinct measure showing broader concerns.
And I think some quite high-profile figures were named.
That's right. The finance minister, Bezalel Smotrich, and the national security minister, Itamar Ben-Gvir, were among those targeted,
Right.
both key figures in the current Israeli government.
So how has Israel reacted to all this? The trade talk suspension, these sanctions against ministers?
Well, the Israeli government's response has been quite robust. They've publicly called the UK's actions unjustified, and they've also accused the UK of having an anti-Israel bias. So clearly it's created significant diplomatic friction.
It certainly seems to be making waves internationally and domestically, too, I imagine. How has this decision gone down here in the UK?
It's been, well, mixed. You have many people who applaud the move. They see it as the UK taking a stand for human rights, a necessary response.
But not universal support.
No, there's definitely criticism too, particularly from some on the conservative benches, perhaps reflecting more traditional economic priorities. Their arguments tend to focus on the potential hit to UK economic interests, especially thinking about post-Brexit trade deals.
Right, the economic versus human rights angle. And shifting back to Israel, what's the internal political climate like there with this external pressure mounting?
Prime Minister Netanyahu is certainly facing internal pressures. He has far-right coalition partners who are very strongly against making any concessions, whether on Gaza or the West Bank. This creates a difficult internal dynamic, potentially risking political instability if he were seen to sort of bow to international pressure.
And on the world stage, this could lead to further problems for Israel.
Absolutely. This kind of action from a country like the UK, suspending trade talks, signals a weakening of international support. It could definitely contribute to greater isolation if things don't change.
So looking at the bigger picture then, what does this suspension really mean for the future of UK-Israel relations? Is it a watershed moment?
It could be. It certainly signals a potential shift, maybe a greater willingness in UK foreign policy to prioritize human rights, even when it affects established relationships. But it's also worth noting, both sides have said they want to maintain strong ties overall.
I did see reports suggesting Israel wants to keep some things separate.
That's right. Israeli officials seem keen to sort of compartmentalize, to separate the economic relationship from the political disagreements over Gaza and the West Bank. They want cooperation elsewhere to continue.
Which brings us to the final crucial question, I suppose. Do you see these trade talks getting back on track anytime soon? What needs to happen?
Realistically, I think the resumption hinges heavily on what happens in Gaza. You'd likely need to see a very significant sustained improvement in the humanitarian situation. I mean, the blockade properly lifted, aid flowing freely, and a cessation of hostilities. Those would seem to be the key preconditions.
So it's not just one thing. It's a combination of factors on the ground and, I guess, politically.
Precisely. Ongoing international pressure, like we've discussed, will matter, and also the internal political calculations within both the UK and Israel. It's a complex mix.
This has been incredibly helpful in understanding a really complex issue. Thank you so much for sharing your insights with us.
Thank you for the opportunity. It was a good discussion.
And thank you, all of you, for joining us for this deep dive here on Westferry Times. We hope it's given you a clearer picture of the situation. As always, stay informed and keep asking questions. We'll see you next time.